nis ha ho to ine dina ta ni hinna to ni ta hebin hadi wa sana ho to entone.
That was then, and this is now.
When you put people on a high-fat, meat-based, ketogenic carnivore diet, they improve dramatically to the point that I've had patients that have come out of wheelchairs.
We don't see any signal at all that it's increasing the risk of heart disease.
If someone's getting pregnant from something I don't know about, my job is to learn and understand it.
Lupus, Crohn's disease.
Arthritis, psoriasis, migraines.
How do we help her? I'm watching my daughter wither away.
I was constantly angry,
No one can help my sleep disorder.
constantly agitated.
Hey, I've been having all this arthritis and nobody knew why.
I have a ton of questions.
This is too far out, doesn't make any sense.
One of the most difficult things about undertaking this diet is believing how you feel.
I was losing weight and reversing prediabetes with no exercise at all.
And I began to ask the questions, why?
Hey, Doc, you know what?
You do not have to go blind.
The knee we're supposed to replace doesn't hurt me anymore.
You can reverse this.
If you're used to using food or drugs or alcohol
Sugar addiction goes away,
or shopping
food addiction goes away,
or social media
mental clarity.
to cope, to escape.
Reverse something that all these conventional doctors were telling me were incurable.
She came back for her 1-month checkup,
They have more vim, they have more drive.
off of their medication,
They're better husbands, they're better fathers.
in tears and hugging me.
And that's when I realized there's something to this.
My name is Zane Griggs. I have dedicated my entire adult life to unlocking the secrets to optimal health. From the food that we eat, to the way that we move, to how we rest. Body, mind, heart, and soul.
How did we lose our humanity and what's taken us off track? We're too good of hunters. We came out of the trees not to eat the grass, but to eat the grass eaters.
So meat is without question the most nutrient-dense food that human beings can eat.
We became human because our ancestors became carnivores.
We are goddesses and gods, and we're all put here to learn something, create something.
We were so clever. We developed civilizations and so many things. Art and culture developed from human beings.
And what makes us human is that, the brain. That's the skull, but that's what makes us human. And the human brain is made of fat. The human brain is made of fat. It's made of animal fat.
We're made out of meat. What is eating? Eating is getting in nutrients that are the building blocks for your body. Your body's made out of meat.
You can have your own set of beliefs of what's healthy and unhealthy, but there's only one set of facts. And the facts are how the human body handles food and how the human body got here.
So initially, I didn't understand what was happening. Nothing really spoke to why I was getting healthier by eating a lot more fatty meat and a lot less grains and sugar. And so then I really started reading deeply into the anthropological research.
You look at all of humanity, and we're eating all sorts of things that some of these things didn't even exist a few decades ago. And we're all getting sick, and everything made sense at that point. We're carnivores, but we're not living as carnivores.
The reason that I reversed my prediabetes, the reason I reversed my severe obesity, was because I was moving my daily diet closer to what I call a proper human diet.
I went into medicine to help people, not to hurt people. And I've really built my practice on how we can share what we might call alternative methods. But maybe these are ancestral, instinctual methods.
Many doctors are coming to think this now, that if there's something that we've eaten for millions of years, then we've adapted to that.
But the one common thread through human societies all over the globe is there was always a central reliance on animal foods for survival.
And most anthropologists think that that's how we started to basically turbocharge our evolution and get these big brains that we currently benefit from.
And we became apex because we were able to feed that brain, and we needed animal fat to develop that brain.
We quickly realized as a species, we don't need this large cecum. Our small intestine got longer, our large intestine got smaller.
The last part of the gorilla colon that we have that can ferment plants is our appendix, and mine's in a bucket somewhere many, many years ago.
Basically, we were evolving into meat eaters.
So at what point did humans start eating meat?
When the ice ages came around and this wiped out a lot of the plants and the animals, it forced our ancestors at that point, Homo habilis, to manifest our destiny as apex predators, because they were the ones that had figured out tools, figured out tactics, and were able to hunt large animals as a primary source and not just scavenge.
Immediately, we had access to this level of nutrition that our ancestors had never had access to before.
And then about that point, 2.5 million years ago, has an immediate uptick in the height and the brain size.
This is something that has allowed us to not only survive, but thrive.
That world was a world where people were hardy, could handle weather changes, and people were knowledgeable.
And it grew up and up and up until about 15,000 years ago, and it goes straight down.
And at that point, we sort of overate our food supply.
We started replacing optimization foods with fallback or poverty foods. Out of starvation, basically, we started eating more grains.
When man developed agriculture, we saw a pretty dramatic drop in our brain size.
People talk about the agricultural revolution. I think to be more accurate, you would call it an agricultural de-evolution.
There's a very clear line in the fossil record, pre and post agriculture, everywhere and every when that our ancestors moved to agriculture, the same pattern emerged. The height and health and brain size of humans declined sharply.
We shrunk, we lost about 6 inches in height.
Signs of infectious disease, signs of tuberculosis in the spinal column.
Severe dental decay, cardiac disease.
After agriculture, but not before agriculture, people were much, much healthier.
The evidence is inarguable that when we replace meat with grains, we get shorter and sicker and fatter. I'm Dr. Ken Berry, a family physician. I've been practicing family medicine for over 22 years in rural Tennessee.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Anthony Chafee. I'm an American medical doctor, but I currently practice in Perth, Australia.
I began my fitness journey in 1988, diving into weightlifting and then experimenting with my diet with a desire to avoid chronic disease. After a few years on a vegetarian diet, I had lost both muscle and energy. Reintroducing meat into my meals was a game changer. My mental clarity and energy returned immediately. In 1998, my career shifted into fitness training, but it wasn't until I faced my own health challenges, overtraining and inadequate nutrition, that I learned the real key to health, a balanced approach that honors nutrition, exercise, and recovery with meat at the foundation. I became fascinated with understanding why the consumption of meat has gotten such a bad reputation over the past 100 plus years.
There was a study by the British in the 1920s. They looked at the eating habits of the Maasai and their neighbors, the Akikuyu.
Many people will say, you know, humans don't have canines.
The Maasai are well known to be carnivores. They eat meat, they drink blood, and they drink milk.
It's obvious that we evolved from animals that ate mostly plants.
Then the Akikuyu, who are eating a whole food, plant-based diet. It's a vegan's dream, just out on a commune, just growing your own plants. And yet they were very sick.
When we look at our least distant ancestors, the gorilla and the chimpanzee, they have significant canine teeth.
Maasai men were on average 5 inches taller, 23 pounds heavier of lean body mass, and 50% stronger. And they had none of the chronic diseases and malnutrition issues that the Akikuyu suffered from.
So you can't use the lack of canine teeth as evidence that we shouldn't be carnivores. That stops making sense at that point.
Then you look at other historical populations. The work of Dr. J.H. Salisbury showed when he was living with the Native Americans in the Great Plains, they were predominantly just eating bison, and they were extremely healthy. And Salisbury found that they were actually living well over 100 as healthy, active adults, not just sitting in a nursing home turning to dust over 40 years, but actually out there with packs on their back following the buffalo herds day in and day out. So he was reversing autoimmune issues like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, gout, helping people with tuberculosis and other sorts of serious illnesses affecting people in the 1800s by putting them on a pure red meat and water diet. And this was studied for decades after him, and yet now we've had that overshadowed by the propaganda that meat and animal fats are harmful to our health.
What if the key to restoring your health lies not in cutting back, but in embracing a more primal approach? What if meat, simple, nutrient-dense, and unprocessed, could be your ultimate reset button, the key to restoring your health? Could it be that by returning to a diet our ancestors thrived on, we're unlocking the health we've been searching for all along?
And it sounds a little far-fetched because we all die in our 70s and 80s and we think 90 is amazing. But we know as geneticists that we are genetically designed, based on the length of our telomeres on our chromosomes, that we are designed to live about 120 years on average. And so why are we dying in our 70s and 80s or 60s? That's literally middle-aged. Genetically, we're designed to live 120 years, and if you eat what you're designed to eat, you should live as long as you're designed to live, and that is decades longer than we're living now, and that is proof positive that the things that we're eating are poisoning us, because slow poison is still poison, and if something kills you 40 years early, you're still poisoning.
These modern diseases where we're dropping dead of heart attacks, strokes, cancer is rampant even in children, be explained by butter and meat? That is suspicious.
Human beings are a species that have forgotten who they are. We've forgotten what we are. We've forgotten what we're supposed to eat. It's almost like we have amnesia.
And we're in an era where stress and trauma are becoming universal. It's really important that we care about the nutrition for the brain and understand it's not just the brain, it's our hormones and so many other basic things that allow us to be happy and healthy.
And it was this one moment where basically all of the things of the first time as a mom, feeling as a mom came true for me. And I decided in my eating disorder facility that I'm gonna do the best I can to get better. My name is Judy Cho. I am a board certified holistic nutritionist.
Hi, I'm Bella. I'm 28 years young. I'm from Seattle, Washington, but I was born in Shenzhen, China. I used to be a concert pianist, graduated from Juilliard, but now I'm a content creator sharing about my passion for carnivore. My entire teenage life, all throughout my 20s, definitely made me feel extremely low in self-esteem, shy, did not want to socialize, didn't want to talk to anyone because I was so embarrassed of my own skin.
I was extremely sick all the way up until 28 years old. Of course, I was living on junk food and a lot of carbohydrates. And yes, I was doing cereal for breakfast and muffins and toast and a lot of sugar as well. But it wasn't until one day where I experimented on my diet. And for breakfast, I consumed a buffalo burger. And it was like someone took a helmet off my head. I could actually finally think. I no longer had brain fog, and it happened really quick.
My story for me was really personal, where, I was entering my senior year of college, was a high-level collegiate baseball player, and ended up getting riddled with ulcers throughout my large intestine, was chronically ill, basically slowly dying. Being in the hospital bed when I was 21 years old, it made me realize just the finality of life and how short this whole thing is. And I don't want to die without squeezing that entire lemon. And I think foods are such an amazing gateway for you to squeeze a lemon out of all your potential. And who knows what this country could be if we all tap into that just unbelievable power that we've been blessed with.
And we have the strength individually to do anything. And that's what we're all here to do. My purpose in medicine is help people heal and question everything. Even the science that I believed was right, question it. And I'm here because I love learning something new and different. And maybe I'll learn something different eventually and says, oh, no, carnivore's wrong, keto's wrong. But I stake my life and my reputation on what I'm doing.
My name is Dr. Sean Baker. I am conventionally trained as an orthopedic surgeon. I wrote the book, The Carnivore Diet. I've been practicing a carnivore diet for the last approximately 8 years, and I continue to be one of the strongest advocates for this style of eating. In my 40s, I was noticing my health was not going as well as I'd like to. I went to this phase where I went on a very low-calorie diet, eating lots of fiber and lean meats and lots of vegetables, and I was able to lose weight, but I just literally did not feel good. And then I just came across a group of people that said they were eating this all-meat diet, which they had called a zero-carb diet at the time, and I thought that was the most bizarre, quite frankly, the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. But it was intriguing enough because they were claiming and making these what seemed like outrageous claims that their joint pain was going away, they were reversing medical diseases. I did it for a month. And at that time, I had a small following on social media, and we goofed around and said, hey, what am I going to die of? Because clearly this is going to kill me. And so I remember putting a survey up, and I said, I'm going to get scurvy, I'm going to have, my colon's going to fall out due to lack of fiber, or my heart's going to clog up, clearly from the saturated fat. And at the end of the 30 days, of course, none of that had happened. I'm thankfully still here. I felt fantastic. It was like, this is the best I've felt. And I've been an athlete my whole life, so I've got a lot of mileage on me, a lot of aches and pains. And those all went away, which I thought was really, really fun, because I was at that point, I was just about to turn 50 years of age. So I said, well, let's get more people to try it. So we ended up getting 100 people that did this diet for 90 days. And the results were quite impressive. The average person lost about 14 kilos, which is around 30 pounds. They lost 8 centimeters from their waist. Their resting heart rate fell by about 10 beats per minute. Everything got better. And at this point, now we're close to 8 years later, and now literally hundreds of thousands of people, if not maybe even 1 million or more, have done this with pretty amazing success.
And speaking to other doctors and clinicians who have figured this out as well, and sort of get a rejuvenation in their zeal for the profession, because they're actually able to address the root cause of these problems and make people better, which is the amazing thing. And I think that in and of itself is why the carnivore diet has been gaining so much traction, or a meat-based ketogenic diet, because it works.
I have office in Colorado Springs. I was there the other day. And a 38-year young attorney who's had 12 miscarriages has been unable to make normal embryos. Now has 13 normal embryos ready for transfer after 6 months of carnivore.
Right now, huge amount of people needing antidepressants and wondering if their lives matter. We have a pain epidemic. We have a drug overdose epidemic, a fentanyl problem, because human beings are suffering from despair of all stripes now. And there's a very good chance that junk food are very much a part of the explanation for that.
Both my grandfathers committed suicide. And depression and suicide is very common in our veterans, in those that are first responders. I was depressed to a point where I considered suicide at one point. I cried a lot. I dug deep in to figure out why. I did all the meditation, prayer, and all the therapy. But when I went carnivore, it was like a whole new light of life unfolded.
There was a pivotal time when I was on my ketogenic plant-based diet. I had my baby monitor with me while I was going through a binge purge cycle in the middle of the night, and my son happened to get up and he started crying. And I was in the middle of my purge, and I'm like, either I purge out everything I just ate through a binge, or I get my son. And I decided that no, I'm not going to gain the weight that I just ate. And so I decided to make him wait. And so, like, crying, I purged, and then I got him, and I just thought, what kind of mom am I that I'm choosing my addiction over my child? And in that moment, I remembered that I had a friend that told me about this crazy diet that people have been doing online, and that there were miracle healing stories, and it was a carnivore diet, and I hadn't eaten meat for over 14 years. So I thought it was the craziest thing. But in that moment, when I realized that this illness I had was so much stronger than me, that I was willing to try it, because if it meant that I would lose my son again, it wasn't worth it. So even though it just went against all my beliefs of eating meat, but why not? Because if it can bring my life back, that it looks like it does for other people. So I tried it, and then within a few weeks, a lot of incredible things happened for me, and everything started changing. And yes, I used therapy. Yes, I used my faith was a big part in prayer and that whole spirituality. But when I didn't need anything and I wasn't depressed anymore at all, I started to get really mad of everything I believed of myself, my weaknesses, the core of who I was, that I was broken in some way, or that I wasn't strong enough not to binge or purge, like that was all wrong. Then if I can do that, so you don't ever have to go through what I did, that you don't have to have your son taken away from you, that you could have your first New Year's with your child that I'll never have, that I'm willing to share it. Sorry.
What would you do to build your family that doesn't require a shot, a surgery, a pill, or most of your money?
I jumped in. I said, there's got to be something to this. This doesn't seem right, but I'm all for it. And I started and never looked back, because I felt better and better.
At the end of the day, it works. And people are seeing that. They're seeing their family members get better. Doctors are seeing their patients get better.
And I kept witnessing miraculous improvements in health.
I felt the power. I saw the difference in my skin in just a short 2 months.
And it kind of just empowered me to also want to practice this way as an eye doctor.
What can I do? I'm a standard Western doctor. I know all the pills, the shots, and the interventions, but I didn't know what other things I could bring to play.
The idea that I'm going to see a patient who comes in with type 2 diabetes and say, here's just a handful of medications, because that's what the guidelines say, even though I know for a cold frozen fact that if I change their diet and lifestyle, they can put that into remission and not need those medications ever.
I knew I could, through a carnivore animal-based way of eating, reverse their disease.
I knew that there was a better way to treat this than just shoveling pills at someone. I would be ethically bound to do that. In fact, if I didn't do that, I think that would constitute malpractice.
And that's why I can't stop sharing about it with all the young women out there thinking that they have to take medication, prescriptions for their skin like Accutane. They don't have to.
What we eat is critically important to our life.
We should be nourishing our bodies with the right foods and eating more.
What you're putting in your mouth, it's either leading to health or harm.
In my quest to understand whether an animal-based diet is truly the optimal diet for mankind, I set out on a journey, traveling far and wide to speak with people who had fully embraced this way of life. From urban centers to remote communities, I wanted to hear firsthand how their lives had been transformed.
Hack Your Health is a wellness event that has taken place every year in Austin, Texas.
I think where we make the mistake with the carnivore diet is we think it's just a diet. And where I try to help people understand is it's actually the opposite. When you eat real food, in my experience, when you eat enough protein, when you eat enough fat, you don't need to diet.
So I had come from low carb, low fat, low calorie, and I added fat back in and like the whole world opened up.
You hear keto and you hear paleo and you hear, you know, vegetarian and vegan, and they're all diets. And with me, the way I think of carnivore is like, you're just getting enough of the foundational food that you understand how it feels to feel full.
I was about to turn 65 and I thought by my 65th birthday, I want to drop a bunch of weight and get healthy. So I started January 1st, 2021. And since then, I dropped 60 pounds. My anxiety lifted, my depression is gone, my teeth stopped bleeding, my feet got smooth.
In addition to my palliative treatments, water fasting, ketogenic therapeutic diet, I was cancer-free just 1 year later.
I had a stroke after roughly 5 years of eating grass-fed, grass-finished beef. I had 0 plaque in the carotids and the 6 arteries of the heart.
In 18 months of just eating meat,
yes.
I'm down 270 pounds, off the oxygen. My resting heart rate is 68 beats a minute.
Carnivore's so easy and convenient. It takes very little time. You know, cooking vegetables takes time, and there's hardly any nutrition in there. And so if I'm gonna spend 20 or 30 minutes prepping a meal, I want the most nutrition I can get. And then I wanna feel full and satiated and full of vitamins and minerals for as long as possible. And carnivore does that for me.
What if the food we're biologically designed to thrive on isn't just a trend, but a simple, powerful truth? Meat, our most bioavailable source of nutrients. Animal protein provides all 9 essential amino acids in the exact balance our bodies need. And the iron in red meat is far easier for our bodies to absorb compared to plant-based iron. Could this be the most nutrient-dense, species-specific food for humans, designed by nature for our ultimate health?
We hear the term superfood bandied about quite often, but when you actually look at the black and white numbers, even the cheapest cut of meat, even the cheapest hamburger at the supermarket has more global nutrition than any plant food on the planet.
Was the promise of enhanced health, weight loss, and mental clarity really achievable by cutting out all plant-based foods? What did people experience once they embraced this radical shift in their nutrition? What I found was both surprising and compelling.
When I eat, what do I need to obtain from my diet in order to survive? And those are essential amino acids, there are essential fats, there's vitamins, there's a mineral, there's some component of energy. You can argue maybe water, and that's it. We don't require anything else. And guess where you can get all those things? You can get all those things from eating other animals.
A thing that my wife and I came up with a few years ago, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. Super easy to remember. It's going to eliminate all of the anti-nutrients. The only thing you're getting from that is healthy fat, healthy protein, lots of vitamins and minerals.
So it's perfect nutrition. You get everything you need and nothing that you don't.
If meat is such a nutrient-dense powerhouse, providing all the energy, essential amino acids and fats, vitamins and minerals your body requires for optimal performance and health, do we still need carbohydrates?
When you don't eat carbohydrates, your body will make carbohydrates to the extent that you need them. So if you just eat meat and eat what we're supposed to eat, your body is able to work the way it's supposed to work. So you will make all the energy and carbohydrates that you need. So you do need carbohydrates for certain processes in your body, and you make all of those through a process called gluconeogenesis in your liver.
Your liver can make as much glucose, sugar, as your body needs at any given moment in time. And indeed, your liver will make more and make less depending on what you're doing. If you're sleeping versus if you're doing jumping jacks, if you're upset versus you're calm. Your liver can detect all of these things through chemical signals in the bloodstream, and it will increase or decrease the amount of glucose your liver's making from second to second over the course of the day without you having to think about it, without you having to do anything about it, and also without you having to eat any sugar whatsoever.
So energy is transported to your liver from your fat stores, which is how it's supposed to be, and you make glucose, you make glycogen, you also make ketones now, which are very beneficial.
A ketone is a type of molecule produced by the liver when the body burns fat for fuel instead of carbohydrates. New studies show that ketones, including acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone, could be a primary fuel source versus a backup fuel source. This is evident by the fact that most of our tissue, including our brains, heart, most organs, and muscles, will run on ketones whenever they're available, even when glucose is available in abundance.
When you eat fatty meats, your body emulsifies and breaks down that fat through a known pathway. And then we can use the triglycerides, the fatty acids, and the ketones. We can burn those for fuel.
There's a very specialized testing, which I think is going to be medicine of the future, called metabolomic testing. What is metabolomic testing? Well, you probably heard of genomics, right? Where you're looking at certain genetic problems that people have. And that's a good test to do, but it doesn't tell you what's happening right now. It only tells you potentially what weaknesses that you might have. Metabolomic testing combines the genetics, the genome, with epigenetics, your lifestyle, what you're eating, your habits, sleeping, everything. This test goes way beyond a blood test. It goes deep into the cells, and it looks at what's happening in the biochemical pathways. You're able to see the assembly line of chemical reactions in the mitochondria, where the body turns fuel into ATP, or energy. And so if someone's going from chemical A to chemical B, and it doesn't work because there's a missing cofactor or a nutrient like a vitamin or a mineral or a trace mineral, that flow of biochemistry gets jammed up. But this next part is very, very interesting. When I interviewed the doctor who specializes in metabolomics, the number one thing he said he finds in nearly every single case is they're not consuming enough red meat. They're not consuming enough high quality protein to allow the input of that protein in the body so you can make biochemical reactions, muscle, ligaments, tendons. So grass-fed animal products are not only safe, but they're essential for a healthy body.
When I got into this field and started looking at this, there are many people that are like, oh, your body needs glucose. You need to eat 120 grams of sugar a day, of carbohydrates a day, in order to fuel your brain alone. Well, it turns out that's not true. The vast majority of human cells in the brain, in the heart, every other important organ in your body can burn this fat for fuel, and it seems like they prefer it. Your brain can run on ketones. In fact, when I asked these plant-based authorities, what specific cell in the human body, what specific cell in the brain must have glucose that's not able to burn fatty acids, triglycerides, ketones for fuel, I always get a silence.
In my practice, we try to get our patients to transfer their dominant carbohydrate load across to a dominant fat load. And if they increase their fat consumption, now you can do that on a vegetarian diet, olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, a lot more difficult. It's so much easier when you eat animals, and the human body likes it.
So I would love for people to ideally get to a point of eating the rainbow of meats, or what I call the rainbow of meats, which is land, sea, and air. So all the different types of animals, because I think every different type of animal has different nutrient profiles. And then if you could get some more of like the eggs, because the eggs also have a lot of the minerals as well, like choline and biotin as an example. So all of those things are beneficial. And so I share a lot of my boys' lunch boxes, and I give them a variety of meats. I try not to do just beef or just chicken, because all meats have different nutrient profiles.
My name is James Arthur Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Seatopia. The rich supply of omega-3s from seafood in estuaries was directly related to our evolution. Being in and around seafood allowed early versions of man to actually have the rich and consistent source of omega-3s that allowed the evolution of the prefrontal cortex. You can supplement, you can take a fish oil supplement, but it's not the same form. Your body has to then convert it. Our livers have to work extra hard to convert a shelf-stable supplement in the ethyl ester form back into the triglyceride form. When you eat raw seafood, you're actually getting exactly what our bodies evolved to. So the role of seafood in modern nutrition is just giving our bodies what we need. People love eating beautiful seafood, because it's firing on all the neurons in your body. It's just saying, hey, this works for me. I evolved to eat this. I want this. Well, this is the high octane fuel that our bodies are looking for.
The fat in the meat, the fat in the eggs, the fat in the fish, we can use that as fuel just as readily, and some would opine more readily than we can use the glucose that comes from all the carbohydrates, all the starches from fruits and from plants.
The other thing with plant-based proteins is there's limiting amino acids. We are required to supplement B12. We have to make sure, okay, let me be a chemist in my kitchen and make sure I'm getting enough methionine while I'm eating my soy or tofu or soybean oil. That makes no sense. Whereas with meat, I don't have to worry about any of that. As long as I eat sufficient calories in a day, then I'm good. And so that to me is, we were evolved to eat meat, and it was always on the table.
Fat from the meat burns much cleaner. You don't have the metabolic blowback when you're in ketosis and you're burning fat for fuel. It looks like the human organism heals, chronic diseases get better, chronic inflammation gets much better.
So they start to see these diseases go away. They start to see the absence of problems, and by default, they feel healthier. When your diabetes goes away, your blood pressure goes away, when your brain fog goes away, when your low testosterone and your fatigue goes away, when your skin clears up. So the immune system dumbs down on that diet, and they find that. We just point them in the direction.
We are so afraid to eat fat because we were brainwashed or taught when we were young to believe that eating butter, eating animal fats is going to give you a heart attack. It's going to raise your cholesterol, it's going to clog your arteries. But I ate a stick of butter every single day for an entire year straight, at least. And some of those days, 2 sticks of butter, no problem. Because I was hungry for that fat and I was listening to my body, I was alive. And not just alive, I was thriving.
We are just better designed and more efficient at consuming and getting nutrition from meat. It's a much more available source of nutrition, and it aligns perfectly with what we need. You know, it's interestingly, we have these requirements for essential amino acids in particular ratios, and just by coincidence, those things are found in other animals, which, you know, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's design.
And remember, health is not being healthier. It is removing harm. By default, we're very healthy. Evolutionarily, we're very healthy. You can't be super healthy. You're not going to live super long. But we subtract from that. You text while you're driving, you smoke, you drink alcohol, you eat a lot of carbohydrates. You subtract from how healthy you should be. The value of the carnivore diet is not just as a fuel source, but it's how it interacts with your entire body's physiology.
As my search for the truth about an animal-based diet deepened, I realized I needed to look beyond the United States, so I flew to the UK to meet Eddie and Selena Abu, two of the most influential voices in the global carnivore movement. Eddie, a former world-class bodybuilder, and his daughter Selena, a renowned health coach, have changed the lives of thousands with their dedication to animal-based nutrition. Their impact reaches far beyond social media, reshaping the way people around the world view food, fitness, and wellness.
So this is my father, Eddie Abu, and I'm Selena Abu.
Yep.
As a child, from day one, I'd never not bloated, and I always had a feeling after I ate, and I thought it was just the feeling of being full or being like satisfied, satiated, but it was always bloating, painful bloating. And then it wasn't until I got these headaches, I was on this medication, and it made me gain so much weight. And we tried so many things, acupuncture, this cupping thing, I used to cry every day that they did it, and so many different techniques, like natural, holistic, mixed it up, and there was just nothing was doing it. And that's when I tried the elimination diet. So that is just red meat and water, maybe eggs if you want, and that was everything. I stopped every single symptom I've ever had.
The worst part of me was the panic attacks. Wake up in the morning like that, and anxiety and all of that. All of it disappeared when I took all my plants out. I don't take any supplements now, and it's the best I've ever felt. I've been taking supplements since I was in my teens because of bodybuilding up to until I was nearly 60. Crazy. And every single day, and I feel the best I've ever felt without taking these supplements. And that's, I hear all the time, Eddie, you know, what's your blood like? I don't give a fuck about what my blood's like. I know how I feel because I know how I felt before.
What I like to base my diet on now what would be available to a wild human being. So someone who isn't living with so much around them all the time, someone with just simple means, simple needs.
Get some meat.
We are at our local butcher's today. I'm joined by the beautiful Steve.
The thing about coming to the butchers is this, right? You get quality meat. Here, they know exactly where the meat comes from, grass-fed, grass-finished, and you know...
Quality, delicious.
And we get a lot of offal meat from here, like we talk about heart.
Liver. A lot of people, they're looking at the big cuts, the expensive cuts of meat and saying, that's what I can't...
Like ribeye, like what's it called?
Sirloin, fillet.
Fillet. They're expensive.
A lot of people associate eating well, eating carnivore with those cuts of meat, but a lot of these offal are what have all the nutrients in it. Liver, heart are so good for your internal organs that it's going to have...
nutrients.
Yeah, it's full of nutrients and great for you.
Yeah.
Chicken thighs, minced beef, got rump steak, is a fatty cut, but it's still cheap.
Now, let's go talk to Steve, my butcher.
Steve!
Ask him.
So Steve, what are the best...
Stewing beef, brisket, beef short rib,
chicken thighs.
Mince with 20% fat in it.
That's it. That's
probably
cheap,
the one
isn't it?
people eat a lot of.
Offal.
Chicken thighs, chicken wings, chicken drumstick.
These are all, I mean,
all the cheaper cut of the meat.
We eat
and a lot tastier.
They're a lot tastier.
Yeah, the neck of lamb on the bone rather than a lamb chop like that. You know.
And all these cuts still have a lot of fat in them, a lot of nutrients, especially the offal. They have so much nutrients for your particular organs in your body. Just learn how to cook them. Right, what are we cooking today?
We're gonna cook some Eddie burgers. These are Eddie burgers, like offal meat that the butcher made for me. Or Eddie burgers.
Rock salt. No, go back.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the bit she likes.
Plants are trying to kill you.
Remember, they don't just kill us, they control us. Heroin, cocaine, marijuana, nicotine, caffeine come from what? Plants. Plants are the predators. They're deadly.
Every living organism, their goal in life is to proliferate, is to continue their life and their offspring.
The plants have evolved since they don't have the ability to run away or bite us or kick us. They have to use another defense mechanism, and that's chemical defense. And so when you think about the chemical weapons that have been used in wars in the past, they're pretty noxious, pretty bad. Plants have evolved that same chemical warfare strategy. In some cases, if you eat the wrong plant, it will kill you immediately.
But vegetables are still good for you though, right?
Maybe if you eat it, they have a plant toxin, but it's not to kill you, it's to protect themselves so that maybe you might have some gut imbalances or you don't feel as good. And whether it's you or an animal that eats it, it just reminds them, maybe I shouldn't eat that plant anymore because I don't feel good eating it.
The human intestine is antagonistic. It's antagonistic to plants physiologically. We have lost as humans the capacity to process cellulose in plants.
Seeds and other parts of plants are loaded with defense chemicals. One set is oxalic acid crystals. Calcium oxalate crystals help to make a seed firm, and it's a great way to store calcium so the seed can reproduce and use that calcium to germinate. Well, that's a defense structure, but that is harmful to those who try to eat it.
There are so many of these anti-nutrients or anti-digestants. Entire books have been written about them. The most common ones we talk about are lectins, phytates, oxalates, saponins, phytoestrogens. These all have direct endocrine effects on our body or direct inflammatory effects on some part of our body, and they lead to chronic disease.
Plants make about 1 million different defensive chemicals, and most of them can be very harmful. So I already knew that from studying biology and botany, and then when I was taking cancer biology, my professor put that into the context of carcinogens. He pointed out that we knew about 136 separate carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts, and that over 100 in mushrooms, but also spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, all these different fruits and vegetables that we would eat on a normal daily basis. These had dozens, if not over 100, known carcinogens in them, and they were quite abundant.
Plants contain variable amounts of a naturally occurring toxin called oxalates. Many popular foods such as nuts, potatoes, and spinach have higher amounts of easily absorbed oxalates. The oxalic acid in these foods can easily get into the bloodstream and body tissues where it can form oxalic crystals. The kidney stone is the classic example of oxalic crystals in the body, but other tissues such as the thyroid gland can accumulate oxalic crystals as well. They can also irritate the gut, causing inflammation and disrupting nutrient absorption. Many other plant chemicals such as phytates and lectins can cause inflammation in the gut and limit nutrient absorption. However, unlike oxalates, much of their impact can be reduced with methods such as soaking, cooking, and fermentation. Chronic exposure to these chemicals increases the risk of cancer by promoting oxidative stress and even DNA damage.
Some plants can have chemicals in them that reduce your rate of being able to reproduce. And so you might keep eating them thinking that they're healthy for you, but then you don't wind up reproducing. You have no offspring, and so your lineage dies.
Anybody predating plants is playing a risky evolutionary fight with plants who are saying, no, we belong on this planet too. You need us. We make the oxygen, so back off, buddy.
I can't tell you the number of people who are trying to benefit from eating a vegan diet have chronic skin problems, chronic joint problems, chronic digestive problems, or chronic mental health issues. And when they remove the offending anti-nutrient in their diet, all of a sudden that goes away. It's almost like a miracle. It's almost like magic, but it's not magic, it's just physiology.
We live in an era where we have a Disney World view of plants as completely benign and there for our taking, for our well-being. But I can tell you, if you could have a conversation with a plant, it wouldn't say, I'm growing for you, my darling human being. That's not their purpose in life.
If you don't prepare plants properly, they can be quite acutely toxic. And even if you do prepare them properly, or they're not one that would cause an acute issue, they can cause low-grade damage and buildup in your body that can culminate years down the road as chronic disease. You don't die overnight just by smoking one cigarette, but you smoke cigarettes every day, you drink alcohol every day. Over the years and over the decades, this builds up in your body and causes chronic disease down the road. And the same goes for plants, because whether we want to eat them or not, they do not want us to eat them. So no, I don't think you should eat plants, because plants are trying to kill you. And why would you subject yourself to that?
In the early 90s, we absolutely knew that fat caused disease. Lipophobia still exists, and people are still afraid of fat, and the narrative that cholesterol is bad for you and cholesterol comes in meat. No, the liver produces cholesterol. Nature doesn't make mistakes like that. So if you're saying, I'm worried about your cholesterol, but your liver is making cholesterol, you're telling nature it's wrong.
The medical community, and therefore mainstream society, has adopted this hypothesis, which has never been verified with meaningful research.
And how can an ancient diet cause a new disease? Because heart disease, chronic disease, these sorts of things are new diseases. The first recorded death from a heart attack in America, proven on autopsy, was in 1912. There wasn't a single case anywhere in the literature in America showing someone died from a heart attack.
At Cornell, I was told in no uncertain terms, saturated fat causes cancer, heart disease, diabetes, everything, and butter is the most saturated food and you should avoid butter at all costs. And I actually believed that for several decades, to my detriment.
When Dwight D. Eisenhower had a heart attack and then people started having heart attacks, people were wondering, well, what's the culprit? And so Ansel Keys was a researcher and doctor, and he said it was saturated fats. And then he did this 7-country studies, which he actually did more than 7 countries, but he cherry-picked the data and removed all countries that ate higher fat but had less heart disease. And so that became the recommendations for our dietary guidelines to lower cholesterol and saturated fats, because that is the culprit of heart disease.
There's no evidence of that. That's guesswork. That's guesswork. And there've been some wonderful studies looking at cholesterol and LDL levels, high LDL levels. My LDL's through the roof. But I got a 0 CAC score, but they won't measure CAC scores. CAC score is a direct measure of the plaque in your blood vessels. So in my case, I would tell you it's malpractice to put someone like me on a statin because I don't have the disease they're trying to treat. But they'll look at my cholesterol and say, you must be on this.
When you paint the picture like that, instead of the way the average primary care doctor says, here, you need to take this statin for the rest of your life or you're gonna die. What the patient hears is, oh, I'm gonna die very quickly if I don't start taking this life-saving drug. You take a cholesterol-lowering drug every single day for 10 or 20 years, it might increase your lifespan by 3 to 5 days. If cholesterol, having high cholesterol, if that were the dangerous risk factor that it's been painted to be over the last few decades, then when somebody goes on an animal-based diet, a fatty red meat diet, we should see a huge signal in quickly degrading heart health, and we don't see that. In fact, what we're seeing is the opposite, as more and more tens of thousands of people all over the planet adopt and stick to either a meat-heavy ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet full of fatty, cholesterol-rich meat. We don't see any signal at all that it's increasing the risk of heart disease.
For decades, sugar has been the silent villain in our diets, lurking in almost everything we consume. It spikes insulin, feeds inflammation, and plays a key role in the rise of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. But the most insidious part? We've been conditioned to crave it. And the more we consume, the harder it becomes to break free.
My experiments in the lab, to begin with, we created an injury to the liver. And when we infused fat into the liver, nothing. Liver kind of liked it. When we infused protein into the liver, nothing. The liver liked it. But in a dose-response way, when we infused sugar into the liver, the sugar, the concentrated sugar, caused inflammation of the cells that line the blood vessels. And within a few hours, we could recreate a very similar injury to what happens when you have a heart attack or a stroke.
One of the epiphanies that blew me away is, I thought, well, you know, sugar, of course. If you eat a sweetened cereal for breakfast, that has sugar added to it. But back then, I had no idea that every grain is starch. Long chains of glucose molecules stuck together by a weak chemical bond. And as soon as you eat those, when you're chewing them up, before you even swallow them, that starch is breaking down into just glucose, just pure sugar.
I had an understanding in the face of working with people that were the gods of the lipid heart hypothesis, the gods of fat is bad for you. They'd bought into that. My research was proving exactly the opposite. It was saying, no, it's not fat. The liver likes fat, it can handle fat, it's sugar. But in those days, that was extremely blasphemous.
From the blueberry to the bowl of Lucky Charms, to the, fibrous papaya that's barely ripe, whether it's starch or whether it's fiber, it's all sugar. That's why so many people are faced with this false choice. They're like, okay, I'm gonna stop eating Lucky Charms and Ding Dongs and honey buns and stop drinking Coca-Cola, and I'm gonna start drinking lots of fruit juice, and I'm gonna start eating whole grain bread, and I'm gonna start eating lots of whole fruit. They haven't actually decreased their sugar intake at all. All these things lead to metabolic disease, and all these things lead to human suffering because all carbohydrates are made of sugar, period.
Excess sugar isn't just empty calories. It could well be a direct pathway to diabetes. Some studies show that high sugar intake can lead to insulin resistance, the precursor to type 2 diabetes. With over 400 million people worldwide living with this disease, the stakes have never been higher.
Type 2 diabetes in children is now at epidemic status. Children with fatty liver, children with hypertension, children with severe obesity.
The problem is chronic excessive carbohydrate consumption as a carb addict. It's not carbohydrates, it's the excessive use of carbohydrates in the modern American diet that causes the problems.
So this can manifest in many different ways. It can damage your mitochondria, it can raise your insulin, which disrupts over 100 different processes in your body and causes metabolic distress.
Often called the powerhouse of the cell, mitochondria are responsible for converting food into energy. But when we fuel our body with poor nutrition, processed foods, sugars, and unhealthy fats, we stress our mitochondria, causing them to function poorly. This leads to metabolic distress, reduced energy production, and over time, opens the door to chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and even cancer.
There are experimental studies in humans and animals showing that when you put people on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes and get people off medications. So how can meat cause diabetes when in experimental trials and with hundreds of thousands of people around the world, we are reversing type 2 diabetes? So even things like cancer, we think of cancer as a genetic disorder. You get certain genetic mutations and that leads to cancer. But there's actually a robust body of evidence showing that it's not a genetic disorder, that it's in fact a metabolic mitochondrial disorder.
Is there a small genetic component to cancer? Absolutely. But are your genetics, have they predetermined that you're going to get cancer? No. Genetics might load the gun, but only your diet and lifestyle can pull the trigger. The rates of cancer used to be drastically lower than they are today.
There's so many papers that share how cancer cells are just basically mutated cells that are proliferating too quickly, and a lot of them are feeding off of glucose. So whether cancer was from the diet or not, we know that a metabolic therapy can work where if you are fueling your body with ketones or a ketogenic diet, which carnivore falls into, you can reduce the fuel that you're giving to the cancer cells.
It blows my mind that there are gastroenterologists that will tell patients that their diet has nothing to do with their inflammatory bowel disease, when I literally see people putting that disease in remission and curing it just by making a simple dietary change.
There's a reason for that. Our genes haven't changed in 100 or 200 years. We haven't evolved that quickly. It's something in our environment, most likely predominantly the food that we've been tricked into eating. Food that we've been tricked into thinking this is part of your natural diet. You should eat this every day, multiple times a day. The company makes a profit, but you wind up with cancer. I don't know if that's such a good trade-off or not.
Most people have been sort of educated to believe that meat is bad for us. We've been hearing that for, in fact, since 1917. The American Dietetics Association was founded back in 1917 by two women, one whose name was Lena Cooper, and she was a devout Seventh-day Adventist who had a religious conviction belief that meat was bad, led to lust and sinfulness and so on and so forth. So that's been baked into the nutrition science since its very creation.
A lady named Ellen G. White, who was a prophetess and one of the original founding members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who said that she had a vision from God in the 1800s saying that everyone needed to stop eating meat because it caused lust, and lust was a sin, therefore meat was a sin, and it was toxic and horrible. Whether she did or not, I don't know, I wasn't there, but it had a very profound effect, because if God tells you to do something, people sit up and listen, and so people did. So her protege was a boy named John Harvey Kellogg, and he grew up to be Dr. Kellogg. Dr. Kellogg was an extremely famous doctor in America. Presidents went to him, politicians went to him, Carnegie went to him, Rockefeller went to him, Henry Ford went to him, movie stars would go to him. He was an extremely famous doctor. He's one of the original doctors to the stars. He was an inventor. He made a lot of different plant-based meat alternatives, such as cornflakes, and he branded a lot of these things as well, but that's what he would use in his practice. He would put people on a vegetarian diet in order to suppress sexual urges. He would even circumcise boys and girls who were masturbating to deter them from masturbation without anesthetic. And that was intentional to try to hurt them so that they felt pain in that area and didn't want to touch it anymore. He also founded the processed food industry and then founded Kellogg Cereals with his brother, which is now sort of grown into a monster of its own. Sanitarium Foods is actually an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has actually founded, I believe, over 20 different cereal companies around the world. People think, well, this was back in the 1800s, obviously. That's nothing we need to worry about today. But it is, because they started a movement of processed food that was plant-based.
Is breakfast an important meal? Is it the most important meal of the day? It's a marketing message from the Kellogg's brothers in 1910 when they sold cornflakes. But we've adopted that into healthcare. And so many of the absolute beliefs that we have of what's healthy for us is an industry-sponsored narrative. And that's exactly what happened with fat in our diet. When you do an autopsy on people that died of heart attacks and strokes, there's all this fat there. So they said, aha, our blood vessels are being clogged like the bacon we eat. And that narrative was then sponsored and promoted by the tobacco companies.
Now, there are many people who would say big food and big pharma have played an active role in confusing us, in tricking us into selling us poverty and starvation food as healthy, optimal food. Nobody knows the answer to that. We stopped researching things like this back when the big food and the big pharma manufacturers took over several decades ago. These type questions stopped being asked. No one thinks about that because you can't get a patent on that and sell it for $1 billion.
When big corporations started taking over our medical field and then teaching, here's the problem, here's the medication, or here's the surgery, instead of here's holistically how we can make the body stronger, that is a bulk of the issue. And so now big food and big pharma together make billions and billions of dollars.
And then we wonder, why are all these kids getting fat and sick? I don't know. We can't understand it. Maybe it's genetic. We don't know what's causing it. And then big pharma is happy to step in and make a few extra $1 billion with the new drugs that are going to help with pediatric type 2 diabetes and pediatric obesity. And let me just predict, they're going to find even more benefits that these drugs will give children. If we can just get FDA approval for that, then even more children can benefit from our pharmaceuticals. That's not the answer. That's a temporary, ugly Band-Aid put on the problem. The solution to this problem is to stop feeding these kids ultra-processed crap.
Back in 2015, the World Health Organization, via something called the IARC in Medellin, France, there was 23 members on that panel, and they deemed that unprocessed red meat was a class 2 carcinogen when it came to things like colorectal cancer. And on that panel were a number of people. One was a guy named David Clearfield. He's a nutrition researcher. He basically said that this was the most biased, frustrating experience of his entire academic career because they literally ignored all the data, failed to disclose conflicts of interest with a high percentage of the people sitting on that panel. They were either vegan, vegetarian, or members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And this is, something that, Washington University back in 2022 came out with a huge review of all these studies on red meat and says basically the science on this has been extremely shoddy. They literally call it shoddy science.
There are many people high placed in the WHO, etc., that are from the Seventh-day Adventist Church or have that ideological bent, and so they push their ideology. There are major researchers such as Professor Walter Willett at Harvard and Professor Gardner at Stanford, who are both ideologically driven vegetarians and vegans, and they are some of the top researchers in nutrition at their respective institutions, and so they drive a lot of research in their own ideological direction. A lot of the research is actually funded by not only the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but also from the processed food industry. It has been estimated that the processed food industry spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research than the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. So the vast majority of nutritional research being put out is by the very people who benefit from getting it wrong.
Why are we tricking mothers into thinking that the first food that goes into their baby's mouth should be something made of sugar, grains, and vegetable seed oils? Why do mothers think that? Because they're advertised to.
One thing we certainly can say is seed oils were not part of the human diet up until, you can argue a little over 100 years ago. So it's not part of our natural diet. That's clear. If you typically pick up a package or some sort of processed food, usually seed oils feature quite prominently. And I usually say that's just a marker for a product that prioritizes cheap ingredients.
Any corporation, if they're smart, they're going to try to cut costs. They're going to try to make more profit. So you do that by replacing good quality ingredients with slightly inferior. And so over time, that adds up to Lucky Charms, where you're basically eating a bowl of sugar and ultra ultra-processed grains and artificial dyes and artificial flavors and some vegetable seed oil thrown in there for good mixture, what you're eating is not even human food.
Nutrition science went off the rails in the year 1948 when the American Heart Association took money from Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble sold soy oil and cottonseed oil. And ever since they took that money, the American Heart Association has been promoting cottonseed oil, soy oil, and other vegetable oils as heart healthy, and they have been making this claim that saturated fat causes heart disease. Medical researchers were not able to make that pretty obvious connection because they're bounded by this narrative that somehow saturated fat in our diet promotes oxidative stress, even though that goes against all of the chemistry and all of the science that toxicologists put together. The chemists say, no doubt about it, polyunsaturated fatty acids in vegetable oil, they can promote oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is the chemical driver of disease at the cellular level. So by promoting vegetable oils, the American Heart Association was promoting foods that cause cellular dysfunction and that cause cellular disease and that lead to all chronic diseases. This is not a theory. This is what the pathologist had discovered going back into the 1800s.
And so when you have big corporations in charge of the food supply, and currently in the world, we have about 10 corporations that feed 90% of the food to 100% of the people. And that's going to lead to nothing but chronic disease. And then, once we've caused all this chronic disease, there's this other big industry, a lot of us call it big pharma. They're happy to come up with pills and injections and infusions, almost never to cure these diseases. What they'd much rather do is the repetitive, recurring model of profit. They want to manage that disease by you taking one of their pills every single day for the rest of your life, or giving yourself one of their injections every week for the rest of your life. That's a sustainable profit model. They can get huge loans from banks if that's their profit model. If their profit model was curing disease, they'd be out of business in 5 or 10 years because everything would be cured. Just come up with a pill to take once a day for the next 40 or 50 years. That's a much better profit model, so try to focus on that.
We've heard the science, seen the studies, and understood the theory. But what about the people who live this life every day? Meet Johnny Ochoa, aka Old Butch. With a lineage of 400 years of butchers in his family, Johnny carries on a tradition that connects him directly to the land, the animals, and the culinary art of meat. But the story doesn't stop there. To truly understand the journey from pasture to plate, I ventured out to meet the ranchers, the heart of this movement, who raise the animals and honor the practices that sustain not just a diet, but a way of life.
It's just extremely natural for me to be around these animals. It's extremely natural for me to understand all this because it's in my blood. And I'm not just saying that like most people are like, oh, I'm a 5th generation Texan. I am just beyond that. Beyond that, I can see it, I can feel it. People had to grow grains, they had to grow animals, feed the grains to the animals. There's water all through here. And it just helps me really connect with that because I absolutely know it. I know it just in my heart. In my heart, and when I can just see my ancestors. And I know for a fact I am from that bloodline. And that's why for me, I just really see it and I can connect with it.
Every animal is born, every animal lives, and every animal dies. Every animal gets eaten, even you. If you're not eaten by a carnivore or by a predator, you're eaten by the microscopic animals that break down and decompose your body. And the more properly managed and treated the animals are, the more the chicken is allowed to be a chicken and live a chicken life, the more the cow is able to just eat grass and be happy in the pasture, the more the pig is able to pasture and forest and eat acorns and just be a pig, the more nutrient dense the meat's going to be when the time comes. And so treating animals properly is super important. But currently in modern society, we're stuck because we can't overnight all switch to being regenerative ranchers. We're going to have to do the best we can do while actively encouraging regenerative farming and regenerative ranching.
Can we produce enough meat, and how would that affect the environment? How would that affect the planet? The short answer is yes.
The modern regenerative rancher mimics that million-year-old model that works so well for so long.
We can absolutely sustain the entire population of the planet on a carnivorous diet because 25% of the Earth's surface is forest land and rangeland, which you can't grow crops on, but you can run animals through. And you don't have to clear the forest, you don't have to clear the plants, you can actually run large animals through rangeland and through the forest land and actually improve the soil and also improve the amount of vegetation. We had to destroy 55% of Borneo's rainforests to put up palm seed oil crops, killing all the orangutans and snakes and monkeys and birds and lizards and everything that lived in there. You had to necessarily kill all the plants and all the animals living in that area to grow one single massive monocrop. So that's destroying the environment. Whereas if you have cows and other animals on the rangeland or on forest land, you'll actually improve the environment. And it can be part of the ecosystem and then benefit humans as well.
As more and more people make that decision to check out of the modern big food, big pharma, big ag model, then let's go back to the old way.
That's something we can do now. And that's something that we should do now. Because it's not only is it sustainable to produce more meat to feed more people, it's the only thing that's sustainable.
At the end of the day, we do produce enough beef here. And if we were to work on transitioning back to a more regional system, it would ultimately strengthen our local communities. It would add money back to that local economy, and it would cut down on that need for import.
This is my loudest clarity moment that people need to understand. We have 8 billion people on this planet. We have enough land. We have enough historical input protocol. We're not trying to scale anything. We're trying to replicate micro-dose success. And that's what a rancher does.
My passion is raising cattle and being with cattle. And when you are with cattle, you develop a love for those cattle, and it gets in your blood. I have the view that I want to see every day, and just enjoy being with the cattle, and they almost become like family to you. It all starts really with the land and the nutrition and the value of what's in the land and what these cattle eat and what they grow up on. So trying to preserve what we have here and trying to make it as productive a piece of land and sustainable is what we have to do, or we will not have the ability to produce quality beef.
The cow is the land tool. They're the ones that do sequester carbon. They're the ones that do protect the soil. They're the ones that do basically filter out toxins of polluted soil because they have so many stomachs. They have a filtration system that we don't have. They basically grow the soil, the forage grows, they keep us healthy by us allowing them to do their job.
Human health and soil health are one and the same. And I think for a lot of people, it takes a long time for that idea to really unravel and to truly understand what that means.
If you own the land, you essentially would want to make it better. And so that constant rotation of animals is allowing the soil to regenerate and come back healthier than it was before.
If the land is healthy, then these animals are going to have more nutrients that they uptake in the grass and all the things that they're eating. And ultimately, they're going to be healthier. They're going to be feeding us with higher nutrient density foods. And that system effectively is a closed loop system if you're doing it the right way, in this regenerative way. You have multiple animals on the land, almost in this coordinated effort, creating the highest quality food. But what we've been relying on over the past several decades is the industrial model of food, which is really supporting a lot of chemical usage and monocrop agriculture, which is really abusing the soil.
Regenerative aquaculture is critical right now because we have species going extinct at a rate we've never seen before. They're going extinct because of overfishing, and they're going extinct because of industrial practices that are putting pollution into the environment. when we change our relationship to the ocean, when we implement regenerative practices to heal the ocean and create healthy food, we have the ability to actually work with the oceans to create abundance. This blue planet, for millennia, created an abundance of food that fed incredible populations of sea life. It's critical that regenerative aquaculture be brought to the forefront if we want to live on this planet.
The misconception is that it's bad for the environment. It's actually better for the environment than anything else that's out there.
When you have 4 companies that control over 85% of the entire market, why wouldn't they buy it cheap here and sell it for as much as they can here, take our product and sell it for even more there?
Does everybody need to be actively farming and raising chickens and grazing animals? No, but I think that getting closer to your food in some way, shape, or form by, getting close, shaking hands with your farmer, or, if you're somebody that eats out all the time or shops at the grocery store, going to farmers markets, a little more effort in buying locally and seasonally sourced food and then preparing it yourself. That's just a little more effort going into that, I think would go a long way in terms of health.
A lot of these ranchers will tell you, we have too much meat. We just have a distribution problem. We don't know how to find customers and connect with customers because the average US customer is so conditioned to just buying the cheap budget meat that's a byproduct of the industrial model. But if we can continue to do what we're doing to propagate the right information and teach the customer about nutrient density and regenerative agriculture and how much more nutrient dense it actually is to buy from a regenerative farm or buy from a local farm, that's really how you flip this issue on its head, where customers are, lining up to try and find their local rancher, and that's really what we're passionate about doing.
When you go to buy beef, buy it from farm-to-table producers that are out there every day managing the land for the long term and for the next generation and the generations beyond that. And eating beef is a quality product. And just do the research on it. Because if you do that research, you're going to find that by buying from farm-to-table ranchers, support them because they're supporting the land. And if we don't support the land, then we lose the land. And when we lose that, we lose our health. And our health is the most important thing to us to continue to sustain us all moving forward and the next generations moving forward.
It's not that hard to feed this world whenever we're not overly dependent on a broken monetary system and an agricultural system that has stolen our health, that has basically created animal welfare hazards that this nation, or basically the nation of cattle ranchers in the United States, is having to answer to now.
Some of the top companies in the world that sell beef also are researching lab-grown meat. So they hedge on both markets in case one doesn't do too well, the other one will. I think one of the problems with lab-grown meats is it's never going to work. It's a pilot, but you cannot fool Mother Nature. You're never going to be able to mimic the same protein that is in grass-fed beef in a laboratory. It's not going to happen. So they actually tried to do it with milk, and it was a disaster. Professor John Fagan has his own lab, and he tested this lab-grown milk, which they claimed in their website that it was the same as regular milk. But what he found in his lab tests was basically dark matter. In other words, he did a very sophisticated test using what's called metabolomic testing, and the proteins that he found were not natural. They were nothing that mimics either animal proteins or human proteins. It was nothing that even came close to mimicking milk from humans or milk from animals, because they made this milk from a genetically modified fungus. So with no safety studies, we have no idea what this is going to do to the general public.
We can go feed the world by feeding basically one community at a time. By changing our consumption model and decentralizing it a bit, we change our consumer demand. Right now, if everybody in the United States of America went out and said, I'm not going to validate the deceptions that got us here within the cattle industry, within the meat industry, within the supermarket industry, and put their foot down, and they went out there and they shook a rancher's hand, we could change the cattle industry, we could change the food industry in the United States in 2 weeks.
Initially, it seems like an insurmountable problem, but when you start doing a little research into how big ag actually feeds people currently, you realize that there are millions and millions of acres of perfect pasture land that are being monocropped in wheat, rice, oats, corn, soybean. The sound of the night is so much quieter now. You just don't hear the insects and hear the birds like you used to. We're doing that, and it's not from raising meat. It's from monocropping these millions of acres of wheat, rice, oats, corn, soybean. That's what's causing that.
Without animal agriculture, you cannot have plant agriculture. And you can have animal agriculture on every single part of the earth, but you can only grow crops on 4% of the land, and that's competing with cities. As recently as 2017, we lost 27.5 billion tons of topsoil per year because of our farming techniques and tactics. That's an area the size of Kentucky every single year of topsoil. And when you consider the fact that topsoil can take 500 years to grow half an inch, you realize that that's a vanishing resource that we really need to protect.
We stop all the stupid monocropping for gasoline and for ultra-processed crap food that nobody needs anyway. We're gonna have more than enough land to rotate these animals on, to make beautiful meat, to rebuild the soil, to regrow the grass, to regreen planet Earth, so that it doesn't just have a crop on this 1,000 acres for a month or two and then it just lies fallow. It's just empty dirt for the rest of the year. That's not the way forward. That's not sustainable. But regenerative ranching and regenerative farming can actually wake the earth back up and actually remarry us to the earth and to the animals and to the plants, so we can reclaim our rightful place in that beautiful web of life.
So not only is producing more meat for people sustainable, it's the only thing that is going to sustain us long term, both from a health perspective and an ecological perspective.
So if you want to choose health, freedom, vitality, fitness, longevity.
If you are afraid or unsure if this is actually learned, lean into the meat-eating community, and you will finally learn some of the shocking truths about health, food, and how these two things are actually connected.
I always thought about food. I was always hungry, always, it took up a lot of mental space. You think about it. Now, I don't really worry about it. I just, my question is, do I want one steak or two? It's a very simple diet, but it's immensely enjoyable. I literally enjoy every meal I have.
I hope that these stories that we've shared inspire you to know that you don't have to be on medication. You don't have to go to your doctor all the time. You don't have to get your surgery. We can have health, and it always starts with what we're eating.
What we eat is critically important to our life, to the health, and without health, we have nothing.
And people like myself and others who have been largely carnivorous for multiple years would not be as healthy as we are now.
We do need to be good stewards of this earth, and we do need to treat every animal with respect. Both for human health and for the health of our planet, we gotta turn it around and go back the other direction, back to the more ancient way where we were in touch with our food, where we had a relationship with the animals.
This seems very radical, but if you eat like a lion, you'll feel and live like a lion. And I know that each and every one of us wants that feeling, and it will change your life.
Gotta remember what we are and where we came from and what our food should be. The truth is the truth, whether you like it or not.
The undeniable truth is that meat is the most bioavailable, nutrient-dense food source for human beings. We've explored the root causes of disease on a metabolic level, peeling back the layers of misinformation that have shaped our health for decades. From policy to food production, what we consume has been heavily influenced by forces far beyond our understanding. So, after all we've seen and learned, one question remains. In a world where we've come to challenge everything, from the food we eat to the very healthcare system we trust, could the real truth have been right in front of us all along? And if so, are we ready to reclaim our health by embracing the primal power of our ancestors who ate real, whole, healthy meat?
So 13 total years of being vegan, but I was having panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I went through periods of like agoraphobia where I couldn't leave my house. Within a couple weeks of starting to eat red meat, it was like a total miracle. I turned 50 last year and I've literally never felt better in my entire life.
I took on this carnivore challenge, and as I started to feel better, I started to tell my mother, Mom, I can't deny the feelings I'm having. Maybe this might work for you. 3 years later, her scores are reversed, her osteoporosis is gone. She's fit at 72 years old, stronger than ever, healthier than ever. My own issues with sobriety are gone. I've been clean and sober for years now, all of which I pay homage to a diet that I never would have thought would have mattered.
I used this diet to heal from late-stage neurological Lyme disease, co-infections, and mold toxicity.
My goal was to get toned. My goal was to feel better. My goal was to be able to sleep through the night. And now I eat meat and eggs and butter. My heart and my body feel so much stronger. And I feel great.
A Bitcoin influencer that I watched confessed that he had been a carnivore for 15 years. Next month will be 1 year for us on our carnivore journey. My eyes feel great. And now I no longer have chronic knee pain.
When I started buying from local farms and ranches and improving the quality of meat that I was eating, my thyroid function has improved drastically to the point where we've reduced my meds. The world is realizing that everything we've been taught about nutrition is not accurate.
I've been carnivore for over 2 years, and I'm very passionate about making sure people understand everything they can about preventing chronic illnesses.
Be able to crush a pound and a half ribeye at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that'd be my only meal of the day, and I never feel hangry, got energy all the time.
It's amazing, all ages, it solves so many problems and just makes you feel amazing.
I've lost like 3 inches around my waist, and I'm 61 years old. It's definitely gave me way more energy.
I was heavy. I was riddled with disease. I would wake up 5 times a night. So I went off everything except for meat. I've continued to improve. I now live to get as many people to try carnivore and change their lives.